In a world that celebrates speed, efficiency, and surface-level interactions, to feel deeply can often seem like a liability. How do we navigate a world that asks us to skim the surface when all we want to do is dive deeper? This paradox, the burden of being deep in a shallow world, resonates with those who experience the weight of emotional intensity, whose heightened awareness of the world's complexities often feels like both a gift and a curse. To feel deeply is not a flaw. It is a way of existing that involves heightened emotional and sensory awareness. These individuals absorb nuances that others miss, and their experiences are often painted with the richest of hues, a vivid spectrum that few can truly understand. Yet, this sensitivity to the world comes at a price. It can lead to exhaustion, disconnection, and the pain of being misunderstood. As we explore this experience of depth in a shallow world, we must first examine how emotional intensity shapes the lives of those who feel more than the average person. Why do such individuals carry the weight of this emotional burden, and why does society often dismiss them as too sensitive? How do they manage to stay grounded in a world that does not seem to value depth, connection, or introspection? These questions will guide us in understanding not only the challenges of being deeply feeling, but also the potential for transformation and healing that comes with embracing one's true emotional depth. Emotional depth is often a quality that is misunderstood. To be deeply feeling is not just about experiencing more emotions. It's about perceiving the world through a heightened lens. This perception is rooted in what Carl Jung, the famed psychologist, identified as the introverted intuitive type. These individuals are driven by symbols, hidden meanings, and the unconscious, and they tend to see things that others might overlook. For them, reality is not a straightforward, observable phenomenon, but something layered with complex, often unseen forces. This way of experiencing the world leads to a kind of sensory overload, where everything is imbued with meaning and emotion. A single glance can feel like an entire conversation. A simple breeze can stir up a flood of memories and emotions. The deeply feeling person doesn't just move through the world, they feel every moment as if it were a work of art or an unfolding narrative that carries them through time. However, this heightened awareness, this deep connection to the world around them, also creates a kind of exhaustion. Unlike others, who may move through life with relative ease, these individuals are constantly absorbing and processing the world's emotional and sensory input. They are like sponges, soaking up every nuance of experience, from the subtlest body language to the deepest emotional undercurrents. This constant absorption, while enriching, can also be overwhelming, leading to a profound sense of fatigue. But this fatigue is not the result of doing too much. It is the result of feeling everything so intensely that it becomes almost impossible to separate oneself from the emotional and sensory tides of the world. This kind of exhaustion is subtle, a weariness that comes from within, not because of external circumstances, but because of the emotional depth that defines the deeply feeling person. The deeper the emotional life, the harder it is for the world to understand. In modern society, where distractions are abundant and surface-level interactions are the norm, those who feel deeply are often seen as outliers, if not outright misfits. The emphasis in our culture is on productivity, appearance, and surface-level connections. In such an environment, emotional depth is often viewed as impractical, a hindrance rather than a gift. This creates a situation where those who feel deeply are frequently misunderstood. Their emotions, which might be rich and complex, are often dismissed as excessive or melodramatic. Society may label them as too sensitive or too emotional, but this dismissal fails to understand the true nature of their experience. What is often perceived as emotional instability is, in fact, a profound sensitivity to the world around them. In fact, this emotional sensitivity is not a flaw. It is a natural, valuable part of being human. Carl Jung, along with other thinkers such as Donald Winnicott, warned of the dangers of suppressing one's true emotional depth in favor of conforming to societal norms. In his concept of the false self, Winnicott explained how individuals often suppress their authentic feelings and emotions to fit into the expectations of society. This false self is a defense mechanism, a way to survive in a world that may not accept emotional authenticity. But the cost of this suppression is high. The true self becomes buried, and the individual loses touch with their vitality and their sense of purpose. In a world that values conformity, those who resist the pressure to suppress their depth often find themselves alienated. They struggle to fit into a society that prefers shallow interactions and quick fixes to meaningful connection. This alienation is painful because it is not just about feeling misunderstood, it is about being denied the opportunity to express one's true self. The suppression of emotional depth does not only cause psychological harm, it also takes a physical toll. Chronic fatigue, insomnia, and psychosomatic illnesses are common among those who constantly repress their emotions to fit in. The body, as we know, is deeply connected to the mind, and when emotional energy is not allowed to flow freely, it can manifest in physical symptoms. These symptoms are not just coincidental, they are the body's way of signaling that something is out of balance. The fatigue that comes from emotional repression is profound. It is not the fatigue that comes from overwork, but from the constant strain of holding back one's true feelings. This emotional repression can also lead to feelings of depression, anxiety, and existential unease. The individual who is constantly pretending to be someone they are not, someone they think society will accept, loses touch with their inner self, and this loss of connection is felt in every aspect of their being. In fact, this kind of emotional repression is often linked to a condition that philosophers like Martin Heidegger described as the fall, a state of alienation from one's essence. In this state, life becomes mechanical, an endless cycle of actions and reactions without deeper meaning. Heidegger's concept speaks to the profound existential fatigue that comes from living without connection to one's true self. The experience of being disconnected from one's inner essence can feel like living in a fog, with no clear sense of purpose or direction. Healing from emotional repression is not easy, but it is possible. The process of reclaiming one's emotional depth begins with acknowledging the pain that comes from suppressing the true self. It requires a willingness to embrace vulnerability, to shed the false self that has been built in response to societal pressure, and to reintegrate the hidden parts of oneself that have been buried in the name of survival. Healing is a journey of self-discovery. It involves rediscovering the emotional depth that was once suppressed, reconnecting with the parts of the self that were lost or hidden. This is not a journey that can be rushed. It requires patience, self-compassion, and the courage to face the emotions that have been ignored or denied. As Carl Jung suggested, healing involves reintegrating the unconscious aspects of the self. It requires a conscious effort to bring the hidden parts of the psyche back into the light. This process is not about becoming someone else. It is about becoming more fully oneself. It is about embracing the full spectrum of emotional experiences, from joy to sorrow, from love to pain, and everything in between. Reintegration requires courage because it involves letting go of the mask that has been worn for so long. But the reward is profound. As the true self is reclaimed, the individual begins to feel more alive, more vibrant, and more connected to the world. There is a sense of freedom that comes with embracing one's emotional depth, freedom to feel, to express, and to live authentically. Being a deeply feeling person is both a gift and a burden. It is a gift because it allows one to experience the world in a way that others cannot. Those who feel deeply have access to a richness of experience that is often beyond the grasp of those who live only on the surface. They are able to see beauty where others see only the mundane, to feel a connection to the world that is visceral and profound. But this depth also comes with a burden. It is exhausting to feel everything so intensely. The weight of emotional awareness can feel like a constant pressure, an overwhelming tide that must be navigated daily. And yet, despite the fatigue, there is a kind of clarity that comes with emotional depth. It is a clarity that allows the deeply feeling person to see the world for what it truly is, to understand the hidden meanings behind the superficial facades that others see. In this way, emotional depth is both a path of resistance and a path of transformation. It is a resistance against the world's superficiality, a refusal to conform to the pressure to be normal. But it is also a path that leads to greater understanding, greater empathy, and a deeper connection to the self and to others. Those who embrace their emotional depth are not merely surviving, they are living fully. The profound sensitivity of deeply feeling individuals often leads them into an existential crisis, a crisis of meaning and identity. In a society that promotes conformity and the suppression of depth, many individuals begin to question their place in the world. Why does it feel like no one understands them? Why do they feel like they are carrying the weight of the world on their shoulders? Why do their emotions feel so much heavier than the fleeting interactions that others seem to glide through? This existential crisis is not simply a result of personal emotional pain. It is a deep, spiritual questioning one that seeks to understand not only who we are, but why we are here. It's as though those who feel deeply are aware of a fundamental truth about existence, a truth that others are either unaware of or unwilling to confront. The shallow world, with its preoccupation with outward appearances and superficial success, offers no answers to these questions. It is as if those who possess emotional depth are standing at the edge of an abyss, constantly searching for meaning and connection in a place that offers none. Philosophers such as Viktor Frankl, who survived the horrors of the Holocaust, understood this existential questioning. In his work, Man's Search for Meaning, Frankl argued that meaning is what makes life bearable. For those who feel deeply, the search for meaning is not optional, it is a necessity. Without meaning, life becomes a barren wasteland, a place where one's emotional depth is suffocated, leading to depression and despair. Frankl's words ring particularly true for those who are emotionally aware. The disconnect between the depth of their emotional experiences and the superficial world around them creates a kind of spiritual hunger. They seek meaning in every interaction, every moment, but are often met with emptiness. The more they feel, the more they realize how much others are missing. They are keenly aware of the world's inability to recognize the depth of human experience, which only deepens their isolation. Amidst the burden of emotional depth, there lies a powerful potential for self-discovery and personal empowerment. Healing from the suppression of one's true self is not just about alleviating pain, it is about reclaiming one's personal power. Emotional depth, when embraced, becomes a wellspring of strength and insight. It allows individuals to access a deeper understanding of themselves and the world, to see beyond the surface and into the heart of things. One of the greatest challenges for those who feel deeply is learning to navigate the tension between emotional depth and the world's superficiality. For many, this means creating space for their emotions, thoughts, and feelings without succumbing to the pressure to conform. The journey of self-discovery involves finding the courage to trust one's own emotional experience, even when it goes against the grain of societal norms. Jungian psychology offers valuable insights into this process. Jung believed that the path to self-actualization required individuals to confront their own unconscious shadows, the parts of themselves that were repressed or hidden, in order to fit in with the world's expectations. By bringing these hidden parts of the self into the light, individuals can begin to live more authentically, shedding the false self and reclaiming their true emotional depth. This process is not easy. It requires confronting fears, doubts, and insecurities, many of which were ingrained during childhood and throughout life. But as individuals begin to embrace their depth, they become empowered. They no longer seek validation from the outside world, because they have learned to validate themselves from within. They understand that their depth is not a flaw, but a gift, one that allows them to experience life in a way that others cannot. This newfound empowerment becomes the foundation for a life of authenticity, where emotional depth is no longer seen as a burden, but but as a source of strength. One of the most challenging aspects of living with emotional depth in a shallow world is the vulnerability it requires. To feel deeply is to be exposed to the world in ways that many find uncomfortable. It is a raw, unfiltered experience of being alive, a state of constant emotional openness that can be both exhilarating and terrifying. In a world that values strength and resilience, vulnerability is often misunderstood. It is seen as weakness, something to be avoided or hidden. But for those who feel deeply, vulnerability is not a flaw, it is a natural expression of emotional authenticity. The courage to be vulnerable is the courage to live authentically, to allow the world to see you as you truly are, without the protective masks that society often encourages us to wear. Brené Brown, a leading researcher on vulnerability, explains that vulnerability is the cornerstone of courage, creativity, and connection. By embracing vulnerability, we allow ourselves to experience the full range of human emotions, from joy to sorrow, from love to loss. Vulnerability creates the space for true connection with others, because it invites them to see us as we truly are, not as the carefully constructed persona we show the world. For deeply feeling individuals, vulnerability is not a choice, it is the only way to live authentically. This courage to be vulnerable is both a gift and a challenge. It requires the willingness to expose one's emotional world to others, knowing that not everyone will understand or appreciate it. But in embracing vulnerability, deeply feeling individuals create opportunities for deeper connection and more meaningful relationships. They become able to form bonds based on authenticity, not pretense. And while this may leave them open to hurt, it also allows them to experience life in its full richness. As deeply feeling individuals begin to embrace their own emotional depth, they often start to see it in others. One of the most beautiful aspects of this process is that it creates a ripple effect, a ripple that can encourage others to embrace their own depth as well. As we become more comfortable with our own vulnerability and authenticity, we create space for others to do the same. This is not always easy. In a world that values superficiality, it can be difficult to find others who are willing to go deep. But those who feel deeply can often recognize one another. There is a certain resonance, a shared understanding of what it means to live in a world that doesn't always honor depth. By embracing and supporting one another, deeply feeling individuals create a community of mutual understanding and connection. This is the power of emotional depth. When we embrace our own vulnerability and authenticity, we empower others to do the same. We begin to build a world where depth is celebrated, where emotional awareness is recognized as a strength, and where meaningful connections are not the exception, but the rule. In a world that often seems to favor the shallow and the superficial, being deeply feeling can feel like both a burden and a gift. It is a burden because it can lead to exhaustion, alienation, and misunderstanding. It is a gift because it allows us to experience life with greater clarity, richness, and meaning. The key to navigating this paradox lies in embracing emotional depth as an integral part of who we are. By rejecting the pressure to conform to societal expectations and embracing our true emotional selves, we can live more authentically, more fully. We can find meaning in our experiences, even when the world around us seems devoid of it. And doing so, we can help others to do the same. As we walk this path of emotional depth, we must remember that it is not an easy journey, but it is a journey that leads to greater understanding, greater connection, and ultimately, a greater sense of fulfillment. So, let us embrace our depth, even in the face of a shallow world, for it is through our vulnerability, our authenticity, and our emotional awareness that we can find the truest meaning in life. And perhaps, in embracing this depth, we will show others the way to do the same.